You ever catch a smell that just grabs you by the collar and pulls you clean back through time? Lord have mercy, it happened to me just the other morning. I was in the kitchen, mendin' my own bikini up an old-fashioned peach cobbler, my mama's recipe, crust from scratch of course, when that oven heat came rollin' out and hit me right in the face. All buttery and warm with a little dusting of cinnamon, and wouldn't you know it, I near dropped the whole dish. 'Cause all of a sudden I was 16 again, standin' barefoot in our little clavered kitchen down in Monticello, Mississippi, with a flour sack in one hand and a pair of mama sewing scissors in the other. I tell you what, I hadn't thought about that night in years. Decades even. But something about the way that cobbler smelled just cracked something open in me. Like the past had been waitin' behind a screen door, just swinging on its hinges till I was ready to open it all the way. It's funny, the memories that stay with you. Not the big ones, not graduations or weddings. No ma'am. It's the quiet things. The ones you don't even know are important until your heart whispers remember. And suddenly you're right there again, hearin' the cicadas sing, feelin' the red dust under your feet, wearin' the dress you stitched with your own two hands, out of nothin' but an old Dixie lily flower sack. You young folks wouldn't believe it now, but back then, we didn't have a pot to pee in, and we sure didn't have money for store-bought dresses. Mama always said we made do with what we had, and she meant it. If it wasn't hand-me-down, it was home-sewn. But that one dress, that one night, well, I never felt more beautiful in all my born days. Not before, not since. And I suppose I never told this story out loud before. Not proper. It always felt like a little secret I kept folded up in the back of my memory, like that piece of lace Edie tore off the kitchen curtain to make me a bow. But lately, well, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time I let someone else peek inside that memory drawer. Maybe there's something in it you need to hear. Maybe you're struggling to feel seen or pretty or just good enough, and you need a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the humblest scraps. I didn't know it then, but that night in '53 in that hot, noisy Grange Hall with Will Raymond's hand in mine and sweat on my brow, that was the night I stopped wishing I looked like the girls in the Sears catalog. That was the night I realized beauty's not what you're wearing. It's how you walk into the room wearing it. So pour yourself some tea, or whatever you youngins drink these days, and sit with me a spell. Let me tell you about the summer night I danced in a flour sack and felt like the belle of all Mississippi. And when we're done, well, I've got a question for you. One that might just sit heavy on your chest till you answer it. But I'll save that till the end. For now, let's begin. Land sakes alive, I can still see that little town clear as day in my mind, Monticello, Mississippi. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, and if you were lucky, your story too. Back in those days, the red clay dust would stick to your shoes like glue, and the pines would hum a lullaby every evening when the cicadas started their song. The sun would dip low, painting the sky with pinks and golds, and folks would gather on porches, rockin' slow with a glass of sweet tea in hand. That was my world. Small and simple, but oh so full of heart. I was just a youngin' then, maybe 8 or 9, with more dreams than shoes. We didn't have much, not like the big city folks you see on the radio or in magazines. But what we lacked in things, we made up for in love and faith. Mama always told me, honey, it ain't about the things you wear or the house you live in. It's about the kindness you carry. And you know what? I believed her with all my heart. That was the lesson I learned before I even knew what a sewing machine was. Life moved slow in Monticello. We rose with the rooster's crow and settled down long after the stars twinkled bright. The days were filled with chores, feedin' the chickens, tendin' the garden, runnin' errands for Mama. I'd help her in the kitchen, watchin' as she mixed flour and sugar, her hand steady and sure. I remember sneaking tastes of the batter when she wasn't lookin', thinkin' how those little moments were sweeter than any pie. School was just down the road, a one-room building with wooden desks and chalkboards that smelled like old chalk and hope. I loved learnin', even if the books were worn and the supplies scarce. I dreamed of one day teachin' the children of Monticello, of bringin' the world to that little town through stories and lessons. But mostly I dreamed of wearin' pretty dresses and dancin' at the Grange Hall, just like the girls in the magazines. Back then my heart was full of wonder and belief. I thought the world was a place where good people always found their way back to each other. That kindness could move mountains. That even if you started with nothing, you could build something beautiful out of scraps, hope, and a little elbow grease. I was no spring chicken, of course, but I was young enough to believe that anything was possible if you just held on tight. Mama and Edie, my sister, were my guides in that world. Mama had a heart of gold, bless her soul. She worked hard from dawn till dusk, never complainin', always makin' do with what we had. And Edie, well, she was the one who teased me and made me laugh, even when times were tough. She taught me that a little humor could brighten the darkest day. I didn't know it then, but those long summer evenings sittin' on the porch, listenin' to the crickets and dreamin' under the wide Mississippi sky, that was where my story truly began. That was where I learned the meaning of patience, love, and resilience. That was where I decided I'd make my own kind of beauty, no matter what anyone else thought. So when the time came, and the Grange Hall was callin' my name for those first real dance parties, I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried about what I'd wear. I just knew I'd show up, stitched up flower sack and all, and I'd dance like the whole world was watchin'. Because I had faith in something bigger than a pretty dress. I had faith in me. And honey, that faith, that's what carried me through all the years that followed. You know, sometimes life just drops something into your lap when you least expect it, like a sweet peach on a tree in July, ripe and ready to pick. That's exactly how it was the summer I met Will Raymond. I swear I didn't see it comin', not one bit. One day, Monticello was just the same quiet little town I'd known all my life, and the next, there was Will, tall, clean-cut, with a smile that could melt the Mississippi sun. He was the pharmacist's boy, fresh from Jackson, and he had this way of looking at you like you were the only girl in the world. Land sakes alive, I didn't know what hit me. Mama always told me to be careful with boys. They come and go like the seasons, honey, she'd say, but your heart's something you gotta guard like a treasure. But I was just 16, with a head full of dreams and a heart that didn't know any better. When Will showed up at the Grange Hall dance, lookin' all sharp in his crew cut and starched shirt, I felt something stir inside me, something wild and new. I couldn't explain it then, but my heart started poundin' like a freight train. That night, I wore the dress I'd made myself, that old flower sack dress Mama helped me press and Edie helped lace up with a little bow. I was nervous, I won't lie. I kept fiddlin' with the hem, afraid someone would laugh or point. But when Will asked me to dance, honey, it was like all those worries just floated away. He looked at me like I was the prettiest thing he'd ever seen, and when he said, "That's the prettiest color of flower I've ever seen," well, I swear I almost floated right off that dusty dance floor. I didn't know them that moment, the way his hand fit in mine, the way his voice felt soft and steady was the start of something big. That night, under the warm glow of the lanterns and with the sound of Hank Williams hummin' somewhere in the background, I felt a kind of magic I hadn't known before. Will didn't care that my dress came from a sack or that my shoes were scuffed. To him, I was beautiful because of who I was, not what I wore. I'll tell you what, that kind of feelin' changes you. It makes you see yourself different. Makes you want to stand a little taller, smile a little wider. I remember thinking, maybe this is what it means to be seen. Really seen. My cheeks burned every time he looked my way, and I couldn't help but hope that this wasn't just a passing fancy. Mama noticed something too. She didn't say much, but one evening she took my hand and said, "Ruth, that boy's got a heart of gold, bless his soul. Hold on to that, no matter what." I tucked those words deep in my heart, not knowing then how important they'd become. Edie teased me about Will, of course, said I was giddy as a schoolgirl. But even she smiled when she saw how he treated me with kindness and respect. It was different from the boys around town who mostly just talked and bragged. Will listened. He cared. That summer changed everything for me. It wasn't just about a boy or a dance, it was about learning that love could lift you up, even when you felt like you had nothing. That sometimes the smallest things, a look, a touch, a simple word, could make you believe in yourself in ways you never thought possible. I didn't have the fancy dresses or the big city ways, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling inside, the promise of something better, something real. And Will, well, he was the key that unlocked that door for me. Looking back now, I see how that night at the Grange Hall wasn't just a dance. It was the beginning of a new chapter. The night I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than what anyone expected. And honey, that's a feelin' worth holdin' on to, no matter how many years pass you by. Lord have mercy, life ain't never as simple as a sweet peach pie, no matter how much you wish it were. Just when I thought that summer night at the Grange Hall was the start of something beautiful, well, that's when the world decided to test me. You see, not everyone in Monticello was ready to see a girl like me, a girl in a flower sack dress, dancing with the boy like Will Raymond. Some folks, they whispered behind their hands, casting sideways looks like I'd gone and lost my mind. What's she thinking, they'd say. That girl's no better than the sack she wears. Those words cut deeper than any cold Mississippi winter. Mama tried to shield me from it all, bless her soul. But even she had to face the hard truth that sometimes love and pride don't always walk hand in hand in a town like ours. There were days when I caught her looking out the kitchen window, worry writ plain across her face. She never said much, but I knew she felt the weight of every whisper and sideways glance. Edie, my sister, tried to keep the mood light, with jokes and laughter, but I could see her eyes held worry too. Inside, I was a mess. I'll be honest with you, I was scared. Scared that maybe I wasn't enough. That my dress made of flour sack meant I was less. I remember sitting alone in my room, holding that little lace bow Edie had made, wondering if I was fooling myself, thinking I could be seen for who I really was. I was so full of hope, but then that hope started turning to doubt. What if the world was right? What if I was just a girl playing dress up in a sack? The hardest part wasn't the town's whispers or the sneers, it was the fear that maybe deep down I believed them too. It's funny how sometimes the meanest words come not from others, but from that little voice inside your head. I worried about Will too. Would he still hold my hand if everyone else turned their backs? Would he see past the dress and the dirt on my shoes? Or was I just a summer fancy to him, a pretty thing that would disappear with the next season? But even in all that mess of fear and doubt, there was a flicker of light. Will never wavered. Not once. He stood by me like a mighty oak, steady and strong. I remember one night, after a particularly long day of Snickers and sideways stares, he found me on the porch steps, tears running down my cheeks. He didn't say much, just took my hand and said, "Ruth, you're more beautiful than any dress could ever make you. Don't you forget that." Land sakes alive, I wanted to believe him so badly. Mama's words came back to me then, the ones about kindness and heart. And even though the whispers tried to drown out my courage, I started to find a quiet strength inside. I realized I couldn't control what others thought, but I could hold on to who I was. That was the battle, the fight between fear and faith, shame and pride. Some nights I'd lie awake, wrestling with the doubt, wondering if I was brave enough to keep dancing, to keep believing in that girl in the flower sack dress. But then I'd think of Edie's bow, of Will's steady hand, of Mama's quiet prayers. And I'd find the courage to face another day. That's how life was, a mix of beauty and hard times, of love and struggle. And baby, if you ever feel like the world's too big and you're too small, just remember, even the tiniest light can shine in the darkest night. I remember it like it was yesterday, the night the whole world seemed to stop spinning, and I stood frozen in the middle of that crowded Grange Hall. Land sakes alive, my heart felt like it was pounding so loud, I thought the whole room could hear it. The music kept playing, the fiddler kept fiddling, but all I could see was Will. And not the Will I knew, but a stranger standing there, his eyes looking away like he had a secret too heavy to carry. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but there it was, plain as day. Will talking quiet with another girl, Logan, like I didn't even exist. Lord have mercy, I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. The flower sack dress felt like it weighed a ton, every stitch suddenly tight and suffocating. I stood there frozen, not knowing how to move, how to breathe, how to make the hurt stop. In that moment, time didn't just slow down, it stopped. I swear, the clock on the wall above the stage just quit ticking. Every face blurred except for his. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, but all I could hear was the shot errand of the dream I'd held so close. That night wasn't supposed to be about pain. It was supposed to be about feeling beautiful, about dancing like nobody's watching, about being seen and loved. But love, well, love's a tricky thing, isn't it? It lifts you up higher than you thought possible, then sometimes it lets you fall harder than you ever imagined. And I was falling fast and hard in that flower sack dress that now felt more like a shroud than a gown. I didn't cry right away. No, I stood there, heartbreak clenched tight like a fist, trying to hold myself together. But later, oh honey, later that night when I finally got home, the tears came like a flood. I remember sitting on my bed, clutching that little lace bow Edie had made, wondering if I'd ever be whole again. If I'd ever feel that kind of hope without it breaking all over me. I lost more than a boy that night. I lost a part of my innocence, my trust in fairy tales, and in the promises whispered under the soft glow of lantern light. I realized that sometimes the world you build in your heart can come crashing down in a single breath. And the hardest part was that truth fastened it alone. But here's the thing, and this is what took me years to understand: sometimes you gotta break before you can be put back together. That night, with my heart cracked wide open, was the beginning of my real strength. I learned that beauty isn't about a dress or a dance or even a boy's words. It's about surviving the hard parts, about rising from the ashes of your own heartbreak and finding a new way to shine. I held on to that lesson tight, like a lifeline in a storm. And even though that night left a scar deep inside, it also gave me something else: a quiet courage, a promise to myself that I'd never let anyone else define my worth. Not Monticello, not Will, not even my own doubts. So while the memory still makes my chest ache, I'm grateful for it. Because it shaped me. It taught me that the hardest falls can lead to the strongest rises. And that sometimes the prettiest dresses come not from the finest cloth, but from the strength you sew into your soul. Honey, after a storm like that, the world feels different. I reckon you don't just snap your fingers and bounce back like a rubber ball. No, it's more like the silence that follows a thunderclap, heavy, thick, and almost deafening in its stillness. After that night with Will, the one where my heart broke in two right there on that dance floor, I walked through a kind of quiet I never knew existed. Monticello felt smaller somehow. The streets I'd known since I was knee-high to a grasshopper suddenly looked lonelier. The pines still whispered their evening song, the cicadas still sang, but I wasn't the same girl who once danced barefoot in a flower-sacked dress. Something inside me had shifted. The light that used to shine so bright felt dimmed, like a candle guttering in the wind. Mama was good to me, bless her soul. She didn't say much about that summer, but I knew she carried her own sorrow too. There's a kind of love in silence, you know? When words don't come, but you hold each other close just the same. I spent a lot of days just sitting on that old porch, rockin' slow, staring out at the red clay roads, wondering what the future held. The hardest part wasn't just losing Will or the dance, it was losing that simple belief I'd carried so tightly. I believed that kindness and faith were enough to see you through. That good people always found their way back to each other. But when he walked away and the whisper started again, I felt like all those dreams slipped through my fingers like dust. I kept the dress, that flower-sack dress, tucked away in a cedar chest. Sometimes late at night, I'd pull it out and run my fingers over the soft fabric, remembering the hope it once held. But it was like holding a ghost. A reminder of a girl I used to be and a world that felt farther away than ever. I found myself questioning everything: my worth, my future, even my faith. Why me? I'd whisper into the night. Why did love turn its back? It's a lonely kind of question, and sometimes the only answer is silence. Some nights I felt so lost I wondered if I'd ever find my way back to who I was. But you know what, honey? Even in that silence, something was growing. Slow and steady, like the green sprouts pushing through Mississippi clay after a long drought. I started to see that my worth wasn't tied to a boy or dress or even the town's approval. It was inside me all along, buried beneath the hurt, but still there, steady as the pines. I began to learn how to be gentle with myself, to let the tears come without shame, to speak my pain out loud, even if it was just to the cicadas and the stars. And little by little, I found new ways to hope, new reasons to smile, new dreams that weren't wrapped up in other people's hands. Life didn't suddenly get easy, no ma'am, but it got real. And in that reality, I found a kind of quiet strength I'd never known before. A strength that didn't need the applause of a dance hall or the smile of a boy to shine. It just needed me to keep going day after day, with my heart open and my feet on the ground. So that's where I was, standing at the edge of a new chapter, still bruised but not broken. Still searching for the light, but ready to find it on my own terms. And honey, if you're listening and you feel like you're standing in that same quiet place, know this: you're not alone. Sometimes the darkest silences are just the calm before the dawn. Lord have mercy, if there's one thing life teaches you, it's that you never know when the next good thing might come knocking on your door. After those long days of quiet and hurt, when I thought I might never feel whole again, something small, almost invisible at first, started to stir inside me. It wasn't some grand miracle, no, but a gentle nudge, a whisper from somewhere deep in my soul telling me, Ruth, it's time to rise. I remember it was a humid morning in late August when I was sitting by the kitchen window, watching the sunlight dance on the red clay outside. Mama was in the garden tending the tomatoes and Edie was off at school. I was feeling restless, like a bird whose wings had forgotten how to fly. And then, just like that, a thought came to me, a thought so simple it surprised me. What if I didn't have to carry this hurt alone? What if I could turn it into something good? That day, I decided to start small. I went over to Mrs. Jenkins' house down the street, an old widow who struggled with her garden. I offered to help pull weeds and water the flowers. It wasn't much, but Lord have mercy, it felt like the first breath of fresh air I'd had in months. Her smile, soft and grateful, lit up the whole afternoon. That little act, honey, was like a spark. Suddenly, the weight in my chest felt a little lighter. I realized maybe healing didn't come all at once, but in these tiny moments, in reaching out and giving a hand, in letting someone else's joy fill up a corner of your own heart. I started to notice the world around me again, the way the sun filtered through the leaves, the sound of children's laughter down the street, the smell of Mama's biscuits baking in the oven. And with every small step, I felt a new kind of strength growing inside me. It was quieter than before, softer, but no less powerful. That's when I made a promise to myself, to keep moving forward, no matter how slow. To keep dancing, even if it was just in my mind. To believe that beauty and love weren't just for other folks, they were for me too. Edie noticed the change. One evening, she brought out that old flower sack dress, the one I tucked away in the cedar chest. "You're still that same brave girl, Ruth," she said, "and don't you forget it." I ran my fingers over the faded fabric and a warm smile spread across my face. The dress wasn't just cloth anymore, it was a symbol. A reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. Will had long since drifted out of my life, but his kindness and that first night at the dance left a mark on my heart that helped me keep believing. Sometimes second chances don't come from other people, they come from giving yourself permission to heal. So honey, if you're sitting there wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, I want you to know this. There's always a dawn after the darkest night. You don't have to take a giant leap, sometimes all you need is one small step. One kind word. One gentle touch. One moment where you choose hope over fear. And that's how I found mine. Right there in the simple act of helping a neighbor in the quiet of a Mississippi afternoon, with the sun warm on my face and a heart that finally dared to dream again. Honey, sometimes the hardest thing in this world ain't the pain you feel, it's the choice to let it go. I held on to my hurt for so long, like a precious stone I couldn't bear to lose, but that weight was heavy, heavier than any sack dress I ever wore. One quiet evening, sitting by the window watching the sun dip low over Monticello, I finally made that choice. I decided I was done carrying the past like a chain around my neck. It was time to set myself free. I remember holding that old flower sack dress in my hands, the one that had been both my pride and my shame. It was faded and worn, the lace bow Edie made still pinned inside. For a long time, I thought if I let it go, I'd be letting go of a part of me. But that night, I realized something different. The dress wasn't the past, it was the bridge to who I'd become. So I took that dress, honey, and I folded it up one last time. Not to hide it away, but to honor it. And then I tucked it deep into a box with all the other memories that had shaped me. I didn't burn it or throw it out, no ma'am. I respected it, just like I respected the girl I was back then. Because every stitch, every thread was part of my story. And with that simple act, I felt a shift inside me, a soft loosening of the grief and the doubt. I whispered to myself, I choose to live. To love, to move forward. No more chains. It wasn't a grand proclamation or fiery speech, just a quiet promise made in the stillness of a southern evening. That choice changed everything. It gave me permission to open my heart again, not just to others, but to myself. I started looking at my reflection with kinder eyes, seeing not just the wrinkles and gray hairs, but the strength, the wisdom, and the beauty that comes from surviving. I learned to forgive, not just the folks who whispered, but myself for the times I let their words shape me. Life, honey, is full of hard lessons and broken dreams, but it's also full of second chances and new beginnings. I realized I didn't have to be the girl in the flower sack dress anymore. I could be whoever I chose to be, and that choice was mine and mine alone. I carried that lesson with me through the years, through marriage, motherhood, teaching in that little schoolhouse, and all the joys and sorrows in between. And every time I felt the weight of the past creeping back, I'd remember that night, that moment when I decided to live without regret, without bitterness, just with a heart wide open to whatever came next. So if you're listening and you're carrying something heavy, something you think defines you or holds you back, I want you to hear this. You have the power to choose. To fold up that pain, to tuck it away with respect, and to step forward with grace. It won't be easy and it won't happen overnight, but honey, it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, life ain't about the dresses you wear or the dances you miss. It's about the courage to keep dancing even when the music changes. Honey, if there's one thing life's taught me, and I don't say this lightly, it's that true beauty ain't about what you wear or how the world sees you. It's about how you carry yourself through the storms and the sunshine. I wore that flower sack dress to a dance once, thinking I was just making do with what I had, but it turned out to be so much more than a piece of fabric. It was a lesson stitched into every thread, a story of hope, courage, and love that never faded. Back then, I thought beauty came from the outside, from pretty dresses and approval from folks around me. But now, looking back from where I am, I see it's the heart behind the dress that counts. The hands that sew it, the love that shapes it, and the spirit that wears it with pride. That dress taught me that you don't have to be perfect or fancy to be worthy. You just have to believe you are. I see so many young folks today, and sometimes I worry. I worry that they're waiting for someone else to tell them they're enough, that they're waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect thing to feel worthy. But honey, I want to tell you, that moment might never come unless you make it yourself. The world ain't always gonna be kind, and sometimes it'll try to tell you you're less than you are. But you don't have to listen to those whispers. You see, life ain't about the dresses or the dances you missed. It's about the courage to show up, day after day, with your heart open and your head held high. It's about finding joy in the small things, a kind word, a helping hand, a quiet moment of peace. And most of all, it's about loving yourself enough to keep going, even when the road gets tough. I learned that beauty's not something you put on, it's something you carry inside. It's resilience. It's kindness. It's the quiet strength that helps you stand tall when you feel like falling apart. And honey, that kind of beauty lasts a lifetime. Maybe, just maybe, it's time for all of us to stop waiting for the world to give us permission to shine. Maybe it's time to take that old flower sack dress off the shelf, dust it off, and wear it like it's made of silk. Because when you believe in yourself, when you choose to see your own worth, the whole world starts to see it too. So if you're listening today and feeling small or overlooked, I want you to remember this: you are more than enough. You are beautiful just as you are. And the most important dress you'll ever wear is the one you make with your own two hands, a dress made of hope, faith, and courage. And honey, that's a truth I hope you carry with you every day. Well honey, here we are at the end of my story. Or maybe just the beginning of yours. I've shared with you the night I wore that flower sack dress and felt like the most beautiful girl in all of Mississippi. But you see, this story ain't just about a dress or a dance or even a boy named Will. It's about something much bigger. It's about love, hope, and the courage to believe in yourself when the world tries to tell you otherwise. Sometimes when the evening breeze rustles through the pines and the cicadas sing their song, I find myself thinking back to those days, the good and the hard alike. I wonder if Will remembers too. If he thinks about that night under the lantern light, when the music played and we danced like there was nothing else in the world. Sometimes I reckon maybe he does. Maybe that kind of first love leaves a mark deeper than the years can wash away. But honey, here's what I want you to take with you. Real love, the kind that lives in your heart and in your soul, it don't always look like the stories in the magazines. It don't always come back the way you expect or on the schedule you want. Sometimes it comes quietly in moments you almost miss. Sometimes it's wrapped up in forgiveness or in the gentle act of letting go. Sometimes love is the strength you find in yourself to keep going. So I'll ask you now, as honestly as I can, do you think true love should always come back? Or maybe sometimes it's enough to hold on to the memory, to carry it with grace and let it shape you into someone who loves with an open heart, no matter what? I don't have all the answers, dear. I'm just a woman who's lived a long time, who's made mistakes and found miracles in the smallest places. But I do know this: life is precious and fragile, and every moment you choose hope and kindness, you're dancing with a kind of beauty that never fades. So if you ever feel lost or forgotten, remember my story, the girl in the flower sack dress who danced through heartbreak and found her way back to joy. And maybe, just maybe, let it remind you to wear your own story with pride, to find your own courage, and to keep dancing even when the music changes. And as for Will, well, sometimes I like to think that he remembers too. That somewhere in a quiet moment he smiles and thinks of that night. And maybe, just maybe, he wonders if I'm still out here, dancing in my own kind of beautiful. Thank you for sitting with me, for listening to my heart. I hope my stories found a little home in yours. And I hope you carry it forward with love, with hope, and with a heart wide open.